with Dan Stapleton. He's the author of the book Agenda 2030, The Great Reset. Dan, how you doing?
Doing great. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on.
Just about a week ago, I was on Facebook and I came across something that someone had posted that I think is very relevant here. And it reads, in order to even begin to understand what's going on in the world right now, you have to be open to the idea of unlearning almost everything you were taught. And I thought, no, there's a provocative statement. Maybe a little bit exaggerated, but when you think of it in light of what has been taking place for the past 4.5 years, I don't think it's very exaggerated at all, if it is. Because there are a lot of things that people have learned over the last 4.5 years from the various avenues of the media and so on, that they need to unlearn, because there are a lot of things that we've been told that are simply not true. And it's a matter of sifting through the things that we hear and to take some initiative ourselves to begin doing some of our own research. And why wouldn't we? Because we owe it to ourselves and our loved ones, I think, to have as clear of understanding as possible as to what's been taking place, which is unprecedented. This has never happened before, and it's very multifaceted. And so very early on in this whole process, I'm thinking of beginning of 2020. Like most everyone else, I was watching what was taking place and listening to what we were being told, and pretty quickly came to the conclusion that this must be a really big deal. It's all we're hearing about. And it didn't really matter which station you tuned into. They were talking about different aspects of all of this. And so I was thinking, this is a really big deal. We're hearing about it 24/7, essentially. And so I started to really watch closely and try to see what it was that was taking place. And one of the things that I discovered that to me was a huge red flag, as I discovered many huge red flags as things continued to unfold, I saw that there were many more people who had been dying from the annual flu for decades than were dying of COVID-19. And yet they were systematically shutting down the world economy. And then came the lockdowns. They were locking down healthy as well as sick people. So as things continued to unfold, I had a growing concern that there seems to be something else at play here. So that was really where it started for me. And another thing that caught my attention was that the survival rate for those who did catch COVID was around 99% consistently. And I was watching the stats on a regular basis, several times every single week through about the first year or so. And they were all hovering around 99% survival rate.
Not only that, but the people who died were mostly over 80, and they mostly had about 4 comorbidities.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, there were lots of things that were taking place that just did not seem to add up. So those were a couple of things for me. Another one was when the injections were rolled out, we were told that they were safe, effective, and free. And everyone knew, or should have known, that that was based on an entirely false premise, because everyone knew, and it was surprisingly forthcoming, that these had never been given before, and that they were used for emergency purposes. But the fear factor was so whipped up that people, for the most part, were willing to do whatever they had to do to get back to normal. and to, as we were told, flatten the curve. And so when you look at the assurance that they're safe and effective and free, there was no history to suggest one way or the other. So we had no way of knowing if they were safe, if they were effective. And the idea that they were free, you didn't have to put down $20 to get someone to put a shot in your arm, but we all knew that it was coming from taxpayers.
Not only that, but they suppressed potential effective treatments.
Right.
Like
Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine.
In order to get emergency use authorization, they needed to have no effective treatments.
Right. Yeah. And a person had to do some digging to find out, but it was pretty easy to find out that the clinical trials on animals were a complete disaster. And because so many of the animals were dying, certainly these must be safe for humans. So they experimented on humans on a global scale.
That's what Robert Malone was saying.
Yeah.
He's one of the founders of that technology. He's got
Right.
patents for it. And now they slander him and say that he was evolved early on, but he was not a major person in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So another thing that caught my attention was the fact that for a long, long time, it's taken between 5 and 10 years to make a vaccine before they decide that it's safe to use. This one was ready for distribution within a year of being ready to go. And somehow that just doesn't fit into what has been standardized medicine for a long, long time. So that was another thing to me that I really, when I was looking at these things and many other things, but here are a few examples, it became clear to me that this is not about COVID-19 at all. It's about something else. So what is that? And I was already starting to connect the dots with what I believed that is, and believe even more so now that it is. And then I became aware of a book that was published that has become very popular, very well known, and that's by Klaus Schwab and Terry Mallory. They co-authored the book COVID-19, The Great Reset. So on the cover of the book is the title that marries COVID-19 to the Great Reset. So COVID-19 was the launching pad, and the Great Reset is the landing strip. They gave themselves about a decade to put this master plan into operation, which is a complete overhaul of how the entire world operates. And in 250 pages, they outline exactly what it is that they plan to do. And it's very comprehensive. And so when I was starting to read the book and see what the plans were, and I looked at the publication date and compared that to when COVID-19 hit the fan, which was on March 11th, 2020, the World Health Organization announced a pandemic of global concern. That was March 11th. On July 9th, this book, 4 months later, was ready for distribution of a detailed plan of how they were going to overhaul the entire world and how it operates. And for anybody who has taken some time to do any writing, it takes a long time to get your thoughts together, and especially a comprehensive plan like that. There's just no possible way. It would have taken many years to come up with the detailed plans that they have.
So either they planned the pandemic to lead into the Great Reset, or they had the Great Reset idea already, and then they're using COVID-19 as a justification for it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That this it became very evident to me early on as I started to research that this has been planned for decades. There's no possible way that this took us by surprise. And there are a number of examples in my book as to events that happened that there's no possible way they could have known what they knew without having this planned for a long, long time. And so I give examples in the book of that. And there was just no doubt that the book is 250 pages long and over 170 references, cherry picked from all different resources about how this plan is going into operation and the reasons why. And so, very clearly, this was not a knee jerk reaction to a surprise global pandemic. It's just not even possible. So, those were some of the things that really came to my attention that I thought, okay, this is not about COVID-19. That's actually a smokescreen, and it's about something else. So that's when I I was looking around for lots of for some answers as to what others might think it was about. I was already coming to my own conclusions, and I was looking for some things where other people were talking about the same things. And the more that I researched, and the more I didn't find what I was looking for, which I thought were some pretty basic answers, pretty fundamental things. I decided that I need to start writing about this. And in the past year and a half or so, that's what I've been doing. And the book's available now. I'd like to read the introduction of the book if I could. That would be a really good overview of what it is that people can expect to see there. So, can I do that now?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. It's just one page. It's a little bit lengthy, but for your viewers to get an idea of where this is going, this is really what the book is about. So, the introduction. We're living in unprecedented times. Nothing has hijacked the world's attention like the events that opened 2020 and continue to unfold daily. The global population appeared to have entered a state of mass psychosis driven by fear and has never fully recovered. By now, it's obvious that it was all by design, not by fate, as many were led to believe. Compelling evidence of this will follow later in this book. The ebb and flow of fear-based messaging continues to drive decision-making, and too often eclipses common sense and quietens the conscience. We continue to see many examples of the proverbial statement, when our emotions are hijacked, we are much less likely to engage in critical thinking. The following pages are not an examination of any alleged health concerns leading to the sudden and unprecedented global disruption of our lives due to governmental responses to COVID-19, etc. Rather, the following pages are a concise examination of the story within the story, the final endgame of these global events and the critical issues which all of us will soon face. Like it or not, the Great Reset is now inevitable and will be forced upon the global population suddenly, even though we're being told repeatedly it's coming. This is a complex, multifaceted process which will continue to tighten like a noose around the neck of the global, unsuspecting community. We must carefully consider how it will dramatically affect every one of us. While most follow helplessly from one carefully crafted distraction to another, these pages look beyond the sinister sleight of hand to the actual agenda still hidden from sight. Almost certainly, many have never imagined the future as outlined in the following pages. We owe it to ourselves and our loved ones to carefully consider the thoughts contained in this book. While I've tried to be tactful when discussing sensitive matters, I have made no attempt to be politically correct, as there's no time for such pettiness or cowardice. Time is of the essence now. If you don't believe in a divine reality, then now is the time to revisit your paradigm and explore the pages that follow with an open mind and heart. If you do believe, then now is the time to earnestly seek wisdom and insight, because you're going to need it in this unfolding global crisis. In either case, I would highly recommend that each time you pick up this book, you take a moment to clear your mind of any biases you may have and adopt the attitude of a learner, because you're about to discover things you've never considered before. If your analysis is based simply on your own personal experience or reflects current cultural attitudes, then time will prove you to be on the wrong side of history. A well-known statement warrants careful consideration here. It's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Just because we may have believed something very strongly for a long time, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're right about it. Despite any swings in the political, economic, social, or religious landscape of any nation, this unprecedented journey in human history is far from over. In fact, there's much more still ahead in this global drama. All roads now lead to the Great Reset, which we've heard repeatedly is coming soon. Don't assume you've got this, because if you're like most people, you probably don't. Again, I encourage you to be open to new possibilities, because almost surely you don't know how this intense global drama will end. So that's a kind of a summary of it, and I go into a lot of detail on all of those topics and more, all about the Great Reset and what their plans are for, but mostly what it is that we're not being told.
Let's get into that.
Okay. What we're not being told?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, they have very specific plans to lead us right into the Great Reset. There are a number of different things that they could use to begin this process in a big way. It's obvious from my research that they're crashing the world economy, and there's no doubt about it. I mean, America is going into debt $1 trillion every 100 days. And conveniently enough, COVID-19 was a great excuse for governments around the world to begin printing money and going into massive debt like we've never seen ever before. So very strategically, they are positioning us to accept what their solution is going to be. And that is another part of that is going to be the introduction of digital currency or currencies, so that everything can be monitored, everything can be tracked. And we know that they have the technology to be able to shut your bank account on and off at will with no input or permission from you. We know that because that's happened right here in Canada, when our government decided that because they didn't like the opinions of some, even though they were peaceful, demonstrated according to the law, that they didn't like what they were hearing, and marginalized those who disagreed with government actions and policies. And so they just shut off their bank accounts. And so Canadians know that they have the ability to do this. And we're not the only nation in the world. Governments around the world are acquiring this technology. And
They shut off more than 250 Canadian bank accounts, didn't they?
yeah, I'm not sure what the number was, but it was enough that it made a lot of noise. And
Some of these were just people trying to feed their kids.
That's right. So they couldn't have access to their own money that was in their bank accounts. So they couldn't pay their mortgages. They couldn't pay their rents.
Yeah, knowing what I know about the people involved, all of them were just parents trying to feed their kids and people concerned
Yes.
about the future of their country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so very interesting developments there. And another thing that came to my attention was, and this was somebody who mentioned this to me maybe a year or so in, so maybe about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago or so, told me that there was a text in the Bible that actually talked about this specifically, about this health issue, and so it was shortly after that I started to have a look at that and look more closely at it, and there's actually a prediction in the book of Revelation in chapter 18 and verse 23, where it says that at the end of time, that the whole world would be fooled by pharmakia, which is the Greek word in which the New Testament was written. This word pharmakia, that the whole world would be fooled by pharmakia, which was just another one of many dots that I connected, that there's something here. Why was that word chosen?
Pharmakia.
Exactly. So we know that's where pharmaceutical, the root for pharmaceutical is pharmacy, so on. There's no denying that there's a direct connection there. So usually when that word is translated, it's translated into English as sorcery. And so that's, although sorcery is involved because there's trickery involved, and like a sleight of hand type movement, selling it as one thing when in reality it's something very different. That was the word that was used in the original language, was pharmakia. And so this was another thing that I was looking into to see all these things coming together at the same time.
And the original word pharmakia, it does also imply a druggist.
Yes, it's the use of the druggist. In fact, the definition of pharmakia, and pharmakia is spelled Pharmakeia. That anybody can just on their phone with any search engine, just ask the question, what is the Greek word for sorcery in Revelation 18, verse 23? And it'll come up. It'll tell you what it is. And here's the definition from a Greek lexicon. It is defined as the practice of the druggist, the use or administering of drugs, poisoning, sorcery, magical arts, often found in connection with idolatry and fostered by it. So there's a direct connection there, whether people will admit it or not. I've seen some deny that there's any connection, but they have no explanation as to why that word was used and what it might mean in today's context.
So you think that the Bible predicted what's happening now?
I absolutely do believe that. And in fact, that was one of the things, in fact, the primary thing that helped me early on to start making the connections with it, is that I saw characteristics of many different aspects of what was unfolding and how they fit perfectly into what pharmakia was talking about. And just a number of things that were taking place, such as the mandatory lockdowns and the mandatory vaccinations and the mandatory this and that, and whether it was masking or whether it was social distancing or all of these different things.
And it is talking about the establishment of a complete global control, is it not?
Absolutely it is. And that was one of the big things for me, is that the more centralized governments were becoming to become a centralized government, the more that was fitting into precisely what was predicted, especially in the book of Revelation, but also in the book of Daniel. Those are two parallel books. There's a lot of overlap there. That they're very complementary. The major themes are the same, but there's some details in Revelation, for example, that won't be in Daniel, and in Daniel that won't be in Revelation. So I was seeing a lot of these characteristics coming together at the same time, and from the very beginning, once I made that connection and saw more and more evidence pointing in that direction, I have not wondered at any point on any day if maybe this wasn't what I was coming to believe that it was. Everything was just adding up, and that has never changed. That I'm absolutely convinced that this is where we are. And most people are unaware of that because most people either don't take the Bible seriously, they don't know what it is, what its purpose was, and so on. And so if people are not looking there, they're not going to come to these conclusions because we're certainly not hearing it in mainstream news. That's for sure. So everything was really starting to become very focused that this is exactly what was predicted. And what's very interesting is that the coming of Jesus to our world, the first time in the first century, is well accepted as a fact of history. It's really not contested that a person named Jesus Christ was here. And
scholars agree.
Yes, yeah, that he was here. And so there may be some challenges on certain things that he may have said, but there's no question about it. I don't have questions about those things, but that there's no doubt that it is a historical event. And one of the things that Jesus talked about a lot that we see in the New Testament is he talked a lot about coming back to the world a second time and how critical it would be for him to come back a second time. Because if he doesn't come back a second time, there was no point in him coming the first time. Because the second time is to bring to fruition what he did the first time he was here in the first century. And he not only spoke about the fact that he would return to the world once again, but he gave many details on exactly what to expect just before he would come back the second time. The very events that would need to be taking place all at the same time, just before he came back again, are exactly the things that are happening right now.
Like what?
A lot of things. One is the severe economic strain that the entire world would be under. It is unprecedented what has taken place in the last, say, 4 years with the accumulation of debt on a global basis. And there are many governments now that are beyond the ability to ever pay these back. And I'm convinced that the reason for this is because, as I said earlier, they're intentionally crashing the world economy to force us into a digital way of interacting financially on every level. And that's the only way they can have that complete control and have a centralized dictatorship form of government. So that's another example of ways. And there have been many other things that, like wars and rumors of wars and famines, pestilences, and all of these things. It's true that we have always had these things, no doubt about that. But there are some things that Jesus said that make it clear to us that It's not the things that have happened for most of the history of the world. It's when all of those things are coming together at the same time. That's when he said, you know, this is it. And I'm coming back very soon. So, again, and there's some other examples that I go into in the book about how we can know that this is the time in which we're living. I don't have a shadow of a doubt about it because all of the dots are lining up and being connected.
What do you think the mark of the beast is?
Well, that's a loaded question. I've got a very specific answer in the book on that. I would rather for your audience to go through, see what the clues are, rather than just make the statement. I do know exactly what it is, and it's in the book. What people need to understand, first of all, is that if they don't know who the beast is, there's no possible way they could figure out what the mark of the beast is. The mark comes from the beast. The beast issues the mark. And so if we don't know who the beast is, there's no chance we would figure out what the mark is. So that really is a starting point. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misunderstanding about the mark itself. It's very common for people to believe that the mark is the number 666. That is definitely not what the mark is, because there's only one verse in the Bible that mentions these three numbers, 666. And that's in Revelation 13 and verse 18. And what it says is the number 666 is how we identify the man who leads the beast system. That's what it's for. It says, let him who has wisdom calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. So it's in doing the calculations that we figure out who that man is and what the system is that he leads. And it's all spelled out in the book. It's all there. There are two beasts in Revelation chapter 13 that work together in tandem to bring about the mark of the beast. In the first half of the chapter, it talks about a beast out of the sea. And then in the second half of the chapter, it talks about the beast out of the earth. And these are two independent powers. Both have a religious and political component to them, but they work in tandem to not only convince the world to accept the agenda, but force the world to go along with it. So that's critically important to understand, and I've outlined it in very specific ways in a lot of detail there. The Great Reset is kind of like an umbrella under which other topics that are related in different ways all come together. So just a few other things that are there, again, that are related to the whole topic, is beyond the Great Reset. What about after this? Is there anything after this? If so, what is it? So beyond the Great Reset, that's chapter 5. Origin of evil. Like, why is there so much suffering? Why is there death? Where did this come from? Is God to blame for this? How could there be a God of love when we see the kinds of atrocities that we've seen for most of the history of the world? So if there is a God, how does he fit into this? Is he responsible for it? Or is there another explanation? So that chapter is on that. That's chapter 3. Another topic here is Israel in history and prophecy, which is chapter 6. And in the last year or so, there has been a lot of added attention in the Middle East, in Israel and surrounding area, Palestine, and so on. And so this is a critically important topic for people to understand the role of Israel in history and in prophecy, because there are some very significant things that are going to happen that people need to understand. And if people think, well, we live on the other side of the world, that's not really our problem. This is going to become a global issue in a really big way, in several different arenas, politically, militarily, spiritually, in particular. So that's very important to understand. Chapter 8, why such an increase in paranormal activity? And that's a large topic. But why is it that we've seen such an explosion in paranormal activity? There's programs on TV all the time about this. It's everywhere and comes in many different forms. And what is the fascination with that? And are there any things that we should be concerned about there? So I spend a chapter talking about that, a very important topic. I'll just give you one more here. What's really behind the climate change movement? This is becoming a huge topic. In fact, it has been for the last few years. And what is this really about? Is the planet really about to go up in flames? Is it about to overheat so that humanity is threatened within the next number of years? Really? Has it come to an emergency that we're at the last hour to save the planet? This is very significant because that is one of the key ways that the authorities are going to be using to force the world into the Great Reset, is to scare people about the planet on which we live, and that our very survival is at stake unless we follow their plan. Like, this theme continues to raise up again and again and again. If you don't do this quickly, this is what's going to result. We got to do this. We got to do this. We got to do this. It just keeps changing topics, but it's the same tone, is hurry up and get on board because the train's leaving. And so people are being motivated by fear. We don't have enough time to evaluate the next crisis or the last crisis because of the next one. It's a very fine-tuned kind of strategy to get us to do what they want us to do.
They got the guy on tape from MSNBC. Did you see this, where he's on tape saying that the climate emergency is going to be the next big thing that we're pushing?
I didn't see that, but I absolutely believe that. There are actually three major things, and they're coming in order. The first one was COVID-19. The second one is the climate crisis, so-called. The next one is going to be an internet crisis where, and we're seeing it already, is the crackdown on free speech. So those three things, if they can control those three things, they've got the world by the jugular. And that's about where we are. And these are just three reasons why I'm so convinced that we have entered the final chapter of Earth's history now. We're talking about exactly the time that Jesus was referring to when he said, when you see all these things coming together at the same time, you know it's at the doors. And that is his return to the world, which he promised many, many times, and which the New Testament is just full of reminders and promises about the second return of Jesus. And all of the things, all of the lights on the dashboard are going off now. That's where we are. It's an exciting time to live, for sure.
It is.
It is. So I'd just like to share with your viewers here just a little bit more about the book as far as looking at it, this is it. Agenda 2030, the Great Reset. What's their end game? And on the back here is the website where I have this. It's in electronic format, and I'm just finishing off the last part of the audiobook as well, and we'll upload that just as soon as it's done, hopefully within a week or so. And so this is 2030greatreset.com. And there you'll find this book, both in the e-book form and soon to be the audiobook form. And for now, it's free. Just a matter of getting onto the website, click on the book, and up it comes. And one of the beauties of the online ebook one is that I have a lot of links that are links to interviews, to different discussions about different topics and documentaries and so on. So just a matter of clicking on the link, it'll take you straight to whatever it is that the link is pointing to, which you don't have that luxury in the book, of course. The references are given there, but it's the live link that is on the ebook.
Dan Stapleton, thank you for speaking with me today.
All right. Thanks for having me on. It's been good.